All right, welcome into the Aggie Up podcast. Today, we're excited to bring this episode to you. I've got Dan with the Hive Sports, and we're going to be talking some Aggie football, Aggie basketball, and this episode, I'll tweet it out. You can go to Aggie Up on Twitter, but go to Rakuten.com. We're brought to you by our sponsor, Rakuten.com. If you go to, if you use that link, and sign up for an account, you get $40 towards basically cash back. And then when you buy stuff that you're already going to buy, say you go to Walmart or Macy's or whatever, you get cash back on all your purchases. So check out Rakuten.com. Awesome way to get cash back. So my name is Isaac Draxler. Like I said, I'm joined by Dan. Dan, I'll let you explain where people can find you, your website, Twitter, anything else, podcast, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm Daniel Olsen. Some of you might have seen me on Twitter because I tweet about the Aggies a lot and other sports. So my personal handle is at USU the right blue because we know the Aggies are. There's a couple other blue teams, particularly one down south, but we know that the Aggies are the right blue there. So yeah, I'm the Aggie fan Dan on there. But as far as what I do for so similarly, I like to cover sports as well, and not just Aggies, but all the sports in the Beehive State. So you can find my website. It's called Hive Sports.com. And we're at the Hive Sports on Twitter and Instagram. We also have a Facebook page. If you just search under pages, search the Hive Sports. So those are the ways you can find us. And also we're on basically every podcast app like Apple, Spotify. So yeah, I just want to invite Aggies to listen. I do a hashtag Big Blues Day podcast every week because I have kind of a schedule where I cover different colleges. So on Tuesdays I'll be releasing one every week, especially during the Aggie sports season, like at least until March, and then hopefully some off-season stuff as well. But yeah, I just want to invite fans. Also, just real quick, if you give a 5-star rating and review on Apple, then I'm gonna enter you into a drawing for some swag for your team, which is for most of the listeners is the Aggies. So yeah, that's just a little bit about what I'm doing.
Okay, yeah. So no matter whether you're, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're probably an Aggie fan, but you probably cheer for the Jazz or the RSL, or maybe even you want to get caught up with the latest BYU news or Utah news or whatever. And you can definitely go to thehive.com, right?
Oh yeah, it's thehivesports.com.
So Hivesports.com. Awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect. Yeah, so thehivesports.com. Great. So what we're going to start out with, we want to talk about the coaching search first. I definitely am excited to hear someone else's opinion. I feel like there's a few names and different things going around, message boards, Twitter, different things like that. And I have my personal opinions, candidates that I don't like as much as some people, other candidates I like more than others. And so I want to hear your opinion, Dan. What are your thoughts on the hire first, kind of in general? What do you think the Aggies need? And then maybe some ideas or names that you like.
That's a good one. One thing, I was talking with some friends, and there's probably some of the typical people that we've heard in the mix, like the Weber State coach and just some of the other assistants out there that are kind of big names. But for example, in basketball, Craig Smith, nobody was really talking about him, and he turned out to be a splash of a hire. So I think this time, if we just trust John Hartwell, I think he'll make the right decision, and I think he's looking for someone that just clicks and and has that energy. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't know all the details, but when Gary was hired, I loved Gary and what he did with us before when we were in the WAC. But it seems
Yeah.
like from what he said, like it's a little bit different now. It's a little bit harder in the Mountain West, especially in the COVID year. So I think and I know there was some rumors that maybe some boosters might have influenced that decision because of how Gary did it last time, how good he was last time. But sometimes in the second rodeo, it's hard. So I think if we let John Hartwell do his job, if we find somebody that can be a leader like Craig Smith, someone that's positive, because you see how positive Craig Smith is in basketball, but also has to know football, right? Because
Yep.
so sometimes I know as Aggie fans, when we have a coach that doesn't know football, it just kind of makes us groan and it makes the fan base negative, and then it's hard to win games when the team or the fan base is negative. Like you got to give them something to cheer for, make some plays,
Yeah.
and fast tracking on that. I thought we did that. I mean, albeit against a bad New Mexico team, but if we can play as a team, I mean, it shows that even with some guys leaving left and right, like if we play as a team, we can win games. If we just don't focus on one individual and just make predictable up the middle run plays or pass to one guy every time. I just think creative football plays will help the Aggies succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's for sure. As far as getting somebody hungry, somebody that wants to be here, I feel like a little bit, kind of hindsight's 2020, obviously, right? But I feel like Gary Anderson was kind of convinced to come back and convinced to be a head coach again, where he was kind of comfortable in Salt Lake at the University of Utah. He didn't really have that fire. Maybe, who knows? Maybe if he would have been outside, or maybe if he would have spent a couple years at Utah, maybe he would have figured out he didn't want to coach at all. Maybe he would have been super hungry to get back into coaching and as a head coach. So I think the timing was probably just not perfect, right? Nothing against Gary. Obviously, Gary did a great job the first time. Gary's a great coach. Gary's a great guy. Everybody loves Gary, but yeah, maybe the timing wasn't right, and that's what this time hopefully uh, doesn't happen again, as far as the bad timing, or even obviously a bad hire would be horrible. So a couple of things that I think are really important. I just mentioned kind of like somebody who's hungry and wants the job, somebody who's young, or at least like you say, like you were saying, hungry, as far as somebody who knows what they're doing. If they have experience, great. Um, and then it seems like somebody on the offensive side of the ball is going to be important, or at least have an offensive game plan to kind of be excited. So I'm going to throw out a couple names to think about. I don't have necessarily any inside information about these guys, but the type of guy that I'm looking for is like the Graham Harrell, Kenny Dillinger, who's the offensive coordinator at Florida State, or like a Mark Helfrich, who's out of coaching right now. Just somebody. I don't think it's going to be the most, kind of the highest. I guess the way I explain it is the Aggies aren't going to get the top defensive or offensive coordinator in the nation. Like, you can't just look at, oh, Miami's had a great offense, or Alabama's a great offense, let's go hire that offensive coordinator. It's not going to work that way. The Aggies aren't just going to be able to take the top guy out there, or top coordinator. They're going to have to get creative, like you were saying. And in basketball, they went to South Dakota, right? I don't think every publication or everybody was thinking, oh yeah, hire this Craig Smith guy. He's going to be a legend at some bigger college basketball program. So it might not be the obvious choice. It might not be the obvious name that everybody's thinking about. but those are some of the names some of the types of guys. Obviously, Graham Harrell would be kind of the exception to a certain extent. He's obviously at USC, and USC's playing pretty well this year. So what are your thoughts on those guys? Do you know anything about them?
I've heard a lot of Aggies are in love with like the idea of Graham
Yeah.
Harrell. And what were the other guys that you mentioned?
So I said Kenny Dillinger. He's an offensive coordinator. He's like 30 years old or something crazy. He's super young. He's the offensive coordinator at Florida State, and he's originally from Arizona. Started his coaching career at Arizona State, then went to Memphis, I believe. So he's moved up the coaching ranks really quick, and he's coached some great players. A guy like Brian Johnson, I think, would be a no-brainer offense coordinator at Florida. Somebody like that could come in and kind of make a splash, because I feel like if you hired like a Brian Johnson or one of these guys, even Graham Harrell, you could go to, I don't know, I'll throw out a name like Jackson Dart at Corner Canyon and say, hey, Jackson, I know you got offers at USC, you've got offers at BYU, Utah, wherever. But we want you to come here. We're going to give you a chance to compete for the starting job right away. That kind of cachet, I think, could be really exciting if they hire somebody that's kind of got that young, exciting personality.
Yeah, I definitely think the Aggies would need something like that, because you look and it seems like Craig Smith's done a pretty good job. I know he has some of Tim Duryea's recruits, but he's got some good ones of his own. So I think somebody young like a Graham Harrell, someone who's got that excitement. To be honest, some of those names, I mean, I'm familiar with Graham Harrell. Some of those names I wasn't as familiar with. Just being here out west, seems like a lot of, because I know John Hartwell said that it's not a requirement this time, and I don't know how much of a requirement it was last time, but sometimes people think, okay, you need to be someone that has Utah ties or understand like the Utah, because we have a very unique culture, and with a lot of the missionaries and everything, it makes recruiting challenging, and I get that. So in Utah, I'm probably a little more familiar with those coaches, but if I were to go outside of Utah, I mean, Graham Harrell, it seems like he's doing great things. My question is just, can we, like you said, we can't even, I don't think we can afford the top paid coordinators, because I know one of our guys, Dave Aranda, well, now he got paid by a Power 5 school, but some of the highest paid coordinators are getting paid more than coaches are in the Mountain West. Like some of those big SEC schools are paying guys like well over $1 million, which is crazy to me, because they're not even the head honcho. They're just an assistant. But when you have money like that, I guess you have to try to keep your coordinators from getting picked off by smaller schools that want to offer them a little bit more money. So
and I think, like I was saying, I think that could be a factor for some of those top assistants, and that's why you're probably not going to get those guys, because, I mean, let's be honest, the Aggies aren't even in the top quarter of head coaching salaries. I mean, obviously Boise State pays a lot more, but even like San Diego State, Fresno, Colorado State, there's quite a few programs that pay more than Utah State for their head coach. So really, it's finding that right fit that's willing to maybe take a pay cut from an offensive coordinator to head coach, or somebody obviously that wants the opportunity to be head coach at Utah State. But yeah, there's definitely some assistants. I mean, even going through my list at this point with Vanderbilt and South Carolina and some of those head coaching positions coming available, I've had to kind of trim my list, because some of those guys aren't going to be, I don't think, are going to consider Utah State over